Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight on World Mental Health Day. Thank you so much to everyone who's joining us live and also to those who will be watching the recording at a later time. Thank you so much for being here. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And my name is Sarah Newman. I am the Executive Director of the Climate Mental Health Network. And I am really grateful to everyone who is joining tonight and to all of the participants who are making this webinar happen, and everyone who's working behind the scenes also to make it happen. So a huge thank you. And this is an interactive event, so please, throughout the webinar, feel free to write questions and comments in the chat. There is time for a Q&A with the panelists and all of the participants. So please, throughout, your feedback and comments and questions are very much welcome. And tonight, the event is going to be moderated by Anya Kamenetz, who is an advisor to the Climate Mental Health Network, and she's a journalist. And the panelists are Harriet Shugarman, who's founder of Climate Mama, and Carolyn McGrath, who is a high school teacher in New Jersey, and also the Educators and School Counselors Committee Chair for the Climate Psychology Alliance of North America's Education Working Group, and also Vanessa Villanueva, who is a Climate Mental Health Network Gen Z advisor. And last, Heidi Pan, who is a high school student in New Jersey, and also the producer and host of the 1.5 Degrees podcast. And I'm Sarah, the chat moderator, and thank you also to Leanne Zeitz, my colleague who is behind the scenes making all of this technology tonight work. So thank you again. And before we get started in a conversation, we're just actually going to start with a very brief grounding exercise. I know it's people coming in from many different time zones and locations and so forth. And so before we dive into this conversation, I just want to invite everyone for a very brief grounding exercise. And so if you are able to, please find a comfortable position wherever you might be sitting or standing. And if you are able to, please gently, I invite you to close your eyes and just notice your feet on the floor or whatever position they might be. And your hands, please, I invite you to just gently have them relaxing, softening your hands, having them gently rest on the tops of your legs. And just notice your breath, noticing in your chest, feeling the inhale through your body and the exhale. And is there any tightness in your chest or shortness in your breath? And just see if you can slowly inhale. And as you do that, just noticing the breath coming up along the length of your spine. And then as you're exhaling through your nostrils, just noticing the warmth extending out into the world. And even though we're each on a little square on a screen, we're each breathing in this oxygen, this life force that is essential to our beings, and how across the world we're all breathing in this air and exhaling this air. And see if you can just gently, notice your jaw, if it might be tight or clenching of your teeth, and just see if you can soften it gently, having your lips slightly parted and your tongue soft in your mouth. And I just invite you to take noticing one more inhale, gently pausing, and then exhaling the breath slowly, noticing the sensations in your body as the air leaves. And then if your eyes are closed, I welcome you to gently open your eyes and to return back to the screen. And I thank you all for participating in that very gentle exercise. And I'm going to turn it over to Anya. And again, welcome to everyone. And if you are able to, please introduce yourself in the chat, and please participate in the chat in questions and comments throughout. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really, really helpful for me. Thanks to everyone who's joining us. I'm so pleased to see the people in the chat, as well as our wonderful panel. We're gathered here on this World Mental Health Day. And I just want to express also in this moment a deep intention that our conversation goes towards promoting peace and reconciliation for people. This is a scary time for a lot of people. And I believe that these kinds of conversations are part of what is going to help make the world better. So thank you for participating. I'm here with the Climate Mental Health Network, partly to announce that we are expanding the resources that we've been making available to help parents and others have brave and compassionate intergenerational climate conversations with the younger people in their lives or across generations. And so I'm going to share my screen really quickly, give you a super quick overview of those free resources. They're all available as Creative Commons license for anyone to use as long as you share and make them available to others. I think I'm going to ask Leanne to give me the possibility to share my screen. It doesn't look like I have it right this second. But if you can also go to the link, which I'll put in the chat, which is climatementalhealthnet/parents. And what we have there is we have, first of all, an overview document called How to Talk to Young People About Climate Emotions. And this is really a background document to how to approach that conversation in a way that's thoughtful. And then we created a script for elementary school students if you feel like you need a little bit more background to talk about the facts of what's happening with the climate crisis, have the facts at hand. It's always a good idea as well if children have questions that you look things up together and answer the specific questions that they're asking. But in that document, we do have some of the background that people might want to know. And then what we're introducing today is a script for middle and high school students. And in that script, we're really following closely with some of the scientific guidelines, curriculum guidelines that are in place for best practices for teaching about climate. But in this script, this background document for talking with teenagers with Gen Z, we cover several different areas. One is, of course, the basics for the science. Burning fossil fuels are changing the climate. We cover the climate justice aspect of this and how this might affect Gen Zers within their intersectional identities. We talk about solutions. It's so important when we talk about climate change that we give weight to solutions and the momentum that is growing. In doing that, we really need to be able to say, not in a way that is Pollyanna-ish, but in a way that's realistic, that there are so many different ways that young people can get engaged in solutions. Not everyone has to be an activist. You can work in technology, you can work in culture, you can work in mental health. And then we cover the idea that climate emotions are real and valid, that coping with climate emotions is important, and there are many different ways to do that. So that's our new guide, our middle and high school guide. And then the other piece that I really want to call people's attention to is our climate emotions wheel, This was introduced, it's adapted by research by Panu Bikala, who's a Finnish researcher who published a paper last year on a taxonomy of climate emotions. And this tool is already proven pretty popular. It's been adopted, I think, into some curriculum, and it's just a visual tool. It comes with a worksheet as well that you can use with children of different ages, or teenagers, or young adults, or adults, to kind of fill in and talk about your own climate emotions. So those are the new resources. Again, they're available for everyone. The links are in the chat. And we're going to, and I hope that they're useful. I want to hear from people how we can make them better. And we are going to now, I'm sorry, people are texting me about whether or not I can share my screen. I really don't think I can right now. I don't have the ability to do it. What I can do is show you guys, maybe someone else can share the screen and show the visuals, but right now we're going to transition to our wonderful panel. And we have a great intergenerational panel here. As we mentioned at the top, Harriet Shugarman is an author of a wonderful book about how to talk to children about climate emotions, the founder of Climate Mama. Carolyn McGrath is a high school teacher in New Jersey, and the Educators, School Counselors Committee Chair of the Climate Psychology Alliance North America's Education Working Group, very engaged in these issues. Vanessa Villanueva is our Gen Z advisor, one of our Gen Z advisors to the Climate Mental Health Network. And Heidi Pan is a current high school student in New Jersey, as well as a producer and host of her own climate podcast, the 1.5 Degrees podcast. So thanks all for joining me. And the first question I have for the panel is, why is it important to talk about climate emotions, not just climate change, but climate emotions with Gen Zers, with people who are in middle school and high school and above? And Harriet, I'll go to you.
Sure. Thanks, Anya. And it's wonderful to see so many of you here today. And I'm going to speak to you also as a mother of two Gen Zers on the older side, a 24 and 25-year-old, and as a professor who works with Gen Zers, and I teach them climate change policy. And they come in and learn about the climate crisis, and they're angry because they didn't learn about it when they were in high school. They weren't it wasn't addressed to them in many, many cases all across the country. This is specific to New Jersey and New York that I'm speaking to these young people. And I think we put so much on their shoulders. These expectations, they see the reality of the climate crisis. They're told they're going to grow up with it. It's, they're going to live through it. We give them these messages, good luck, take care, but what? And so how do we talk with them about these emotions? We have to put that on the table. That's for them to be able to share, to know that that is how we begin to move through this. So I think that it's critically important that we specifically talk about climate emotions, because the reality can't be denied. It's before us. We see it. They're living it. And we need to be able to take that weight off by talking about emotions with them.
Thank you, Harriet. Carolyn, do you have thoughts?
Yeah. So I'm a high school art teacher, and I've been integrating climate change into my lessons the last few years. And art is a natural means to introduce emotions into a classroom in a way that I think it might be more challenging in other classes. Regardless of the subject, I think that anytime you're teaching climate, which is, it's an existential threat, right, to all of us. And in terms of what young people, the impacts that young people will face, Gen Z and even younger generations will face, are very significant. And so you can't talk about climate change without all of these emotions being in the room. And so it's just sort of this elephant in the room if you are not also addressing it. I think it becomes tricky as an educator because we're not trained, we're not mental health practitioners, so it can be tricky, but I think that there's a lot of good resources, like Climate Mental Health Network is putting out some good stuff, and Climate Psychology Alliance of North America, we're working on putting out some stuff as well. And just being able to acknowledge the feelings that exist in that space and to name the feelings, I think can go a long way for young people. And also for many young folks, this might be the only opportunity that they have to discuss their feelings about climate change. And in my class, maybe that's through an artwork, or maybe it's through a reflective piece of writing. Maybe it's not, it's not like a class discussion. But I think to just offer those opportunities is really important.
Thank you, Carolyn. And Vanessa, what are your thoughts? Why do you think it's important to have this emotions-based conversation? I think you said in your intro that you feel that the intersection is almost inevitable, but why is this so important now?
I think to understand and to really just address climate change is to address our futures. And whether we have in-depth conversations or not with teenagers, with like older youth, about the climate crisis or mental health, there's this understanding that that's something that's gonna, at some point, whether near or far, really take a hold of our future. And what I've been realizing, and this does intersect with other things like police brutality and racism and just like all these big issues like the climate crisis, when you're uncertain of these issues that are going to take up so much of your future, you're uncertain of your future, right? Like there's like, and it's equal to each other to an extent, right? And so when you're uncertain of your future, how do you know how much you're supposed to invest in it, right? And so I think that a lot of kids who feel like they're not being thought of in different processes and in the climate crisis, they're not investing in their future. They're falling into depression, into cycles of depression, anxiety, even self-harm, or worse. And it can be preventable by just like laying out like the possibilities, the work that is being done, and really just navigating their emotions with them. Oftentimes, I just feel like having a support system in your childhood that really helps you navigate your emotions in a healthy way is something that most of us have never experienced. And so when you get hit with this reality of like the climate crisis, you're either going to walk away from it and ignore it forever and just like let someone else handle it, or it's going to consume you. And again, you're going to fall into these cycles of depression, of eco grief and such. So having that conversation and acknowledging like, yes, these are older kids that have potentially a better handle on their emotions than younger kids doesn't mean that we should only help younger kids. That transitional age is very important in setting themselves up for their future. And so I feel like that makes it super important to talk about climate emotions and the reality that we're all going to face, and let them know like we're going to face it together and we have plans and there's hope.
Thank you, Vanessa. Yeah. So the life stage that you're in, thinking about identity and thinking about the future, is very important. Heidi, do you have more to add from the high school perspective? Why climate emotions and not just the facts?
Yeah, no, definitely. I like that. Climate emotions, not just the facts. I think my short answer to this is just two words, like it's healthy to talk about climate emotions. I mean, particularly for my generation and, future ones that are going to be newly involved in that, transitioning stage of environmental work. Because, not talking about climate emotions, I find it stigmatizing it. I know certainly in my case, when emotions aren't acknowledged, I've tended to either self-isolate, and I know that other emotions like, fear and anger, they can certainly be divisive. And when we don't share, that has a lot of detrimental effects. And in my personal experience, I've been able to turn to recently climate cafes. Those are events where you can openly talk about how you feel, and they really help immensely. I feel like a lot of the conversation currently is about, turning anxiety into action. But I've recently found that that kind of centered discussion on solely action, it's not very sustainable, pun not intended. But if, environmental work is only centered around getting things done, because we are human and taking care of ourselves, taking care of ourselves while taking care of our planet, the two shouldn't be mutually exclusive. So, I mean, just thank you all for being here to learn more about this. It's a really great first step.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Something that I come up against, and I'm sure you guys have too, is this idea that we're going to make it worse by talking about it, or we're going to scare the kids or make them nervous. And so how do we address that misconception if it is a misconception? I'm going to go to you, Carolyn.
So I think, we just did a professional development in my district the last 2 weeks. And there's definitely to see a sense of unease in wading into the waters of talking about emotion, that it's hard for a lot of educators. And I think some of that discomfort is because, we don't want to stir things up, right? Just want to kind of stick to the facts and teach the science, teach the facts, and keep it simple. But I think some of the issues that Vanessa and Heidi were bringing up about, breaking that spiral of silence and that sense of isolation is so important. I think with a lot of teachers too, there's a feeling that you need to teach only hope. Not that hope is not important, but I think if you're kind of coming from a place of we're only going to paint a rosy picture of the future, I think young people see right through that. So I think that really addressing young people in an honest way, and in a way that does provide realistic hope for the future is a good approach. But there's certainly a lot of sort of fears and misconceptions around like wading into those waters, around talking to young people, or even opening up the doors to that bigger discussion.
I think what's so effective is that we have Gen Zers here to speak to this themselves. And Heidi, could you amplify what you put in the chat? This idea that we don't, if we keep you in the dark, you won't be worried about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly inevitable. And, what I put in the chat is that we live in the same world as, people that are older. So we're going to be seeing the same things. And if we're told or not told, I guess, even about the issue, it really leaves us to be working on these things alone. I know when, I'm in school and, prior to starting my school's Green Club, there wasn't really much conversation about environmental stuff. And I felt incredibly alone in that. And that amplified a lot of helpless emotions, So, yeah, no, just it's going to happen eventually. It's already happening. I've met 9-year-olds that are doing climate activism, and, they're doing phenomenal work. And just to, say, oh, they shouldn't be worrying about these things. True, they shouldn't be worrying about these things. We'd like to have a childhood, but it's already kind of out of our hands, and just to not equip us with those tools to be able to help ourselves is more detrimental, if anything.
Thank you. Thank you. Harriet, did you want to add anything?
You know what, I'll just say that, and this is more to our American Gen Z audience, but Columbine happened in 1999 and Sandy Hook in 2012. And children as young as kindergartners are starting their day off with shooting drills. That's scary. And so to not, as Heidi said, the reality, they're living the climate crisis. It's a smoky day. They're can't get to school because of the rain or a forest fire. That's a reality. And so to not address those emotions, to say it's too scary. Yes, we can educate parents, we can educate teachers through the tools like the Climate Mental Health Network has developed and other tools that are out there, but to just not address it isn't fair and is not, we must. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much.
Can I just interrupt real quick for a sec? Because as Harriet was talking, I was just thinking, you know, for educators, this brings up our own anxiety. And I think that's sort of part of the hurdle of, like, you see young people struggling, young people who might be right kindergarten age. How come we can't go outside today because the air looks like this? And you know, we're entrusted with care and education of young people, and I think it brings up a lot of anxiety for educators, and I think that that's something worth looking at too.
Yes, thank you for that, Carolyn. Vanessa, I want to go to you with this next question, which is about how can people who are not in your generation best be allies, serve as allies to Gen Z, beyond simply talking, or if talking is the main thing?
I think that it's being transparent, right? It's being like, yes, we're going to talk about tough feelings, but there's a bright side to it, right? Like, rather than, I think we're used to communication being kind of like how the news is in the United States, and it's just like all the bad things, and it's like highlighting like the facts they say, and the facts are always negative, like it's always gory at times, you know, but the reality is like that's not all of the reality. Like reality is multifaceted, and so when we have these conversations, it has to be multifaceted, and that has to do with different studies and perspectives, yes, but also different emotions and different approaches to what can be solved and what might not be solved, but it can be, I like to say, like damage control. Like, we know that we're in a situation where we're gonna talk about feelings and we might trigger certain emotions, but we need to address them as they come, right? Just because those feelings might arise does not mean that we just avoid the situation in general, because it's kind of like when you bottle up your emotions, or when a kid is feeling some type of way, doesn't get the support that they need, and then they have a whole tantrum. It's because there was a putting off of things, right? And I feel like adults also have tantrums sometimes in a different way. And so we know that that feeling is something unpleasant as adults. And sometimes we're like, okay, we don't want the kids to feel unpleasant in that way because I felt that way. But to do so is just kind of like prolonging the uncertainty and not allowing them to create that own motivation and to share the motivation that you have yourself. So really, I think the communication is kind of just what jumpstarts it. And when you hear a piece of information, subconsciously you're making these kind of mind already. And oftentimes kids are like, well, why don't we just do this? And they're learning the world too. They're getting familiar with everything. And so it's just like, when we don't have conversations with them, we're not allowing them to understand how things might work or the potential of situations. And when they hear it somewhere else, they might get stumped, they might get lost, they might just give up. And so we don't want them to just hear things randomly. We want to have those tough conversations in a safe space and such.
Thank you, Vanessa. Heidi, your podcast is basically a series of intergenerational conversations. What are you looking for from older allies? And this is the time to ask for money, if that's the answer.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, definitely climate finance is a huge thing. So many aspects of environmental work is so incredibly underfunded. There's a really wild statistic out there that's probably Googleable. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's really low. So I mean, sure, that's a great answer to that question. I also recently came up with this like acronym that's pretty self-explanatory for responding to this question, and that is LEARN. I mean, learn itself is a great word. I have a lot to ramble on about how, every generation has a lot to learn from each other and has everything to stand to gain from those intergenerational conversations. But LEARN is L is for listen, E is for encourage, A is for amplify, R respect, and N is for nurture. And I guess I'll elaborate on that a little bit more, but yeah, for listen, if you're, be it your kids or your students, are just trying to, if they're trying to start a conversation about environmental disaster effects that they're experiencing, either directly or indirectly, like through news headlines, but if they're going into their climate emotions, just being there for them is really enough, and just validating what they're experiencing, just taking that first step, to just hear them out. It, coming from a teenager, it's really meant a lot when that happens. E for encourage. This comes after validating those emotions. But if young change makers in your life have an idea for taking action, just being there to support them. I'm really beyond grateful to have adults in my life. Like my journey with my mom that's not perfect, because she isn't really involved in climate work. But she's like driven me to 2 conferences now, and she's let me do my thing, and just people in this space that have, and you mentioned the podcast, the fact that they're willing to, have a conversation with me, that really, that meant a lot, and it still means a lot for me. And I've at the same time experienced the opposite end of that spectrum. I think Vanessa went into this, but when there's not that encouragement, that's incredibly disillusioning. Yeah, and A is for amplify. I mean, this can be sharing incredible resources, that we've already discussed in this webinar with your kids or your students, or even sharing their work, and missions and experiences with others, and better yet, move from representing them to, helping them share their own voice themselves. Off the top of my head, I can say, like, Sarah Newman at this webinar does a great job of that. And I recently spoke with Harry Waters, who, his daughter is 10 now, I think, but he does a lot of great work with amplifying her voice, and respect, just dispelling ageism, because it's not like we can control the fact that we're 17, 15, 5, whatnot. Yeah, we're capable of understanding things. And nurture, I think I mentioned this before, but I'd like to enjoy my life as a high schooler. Sometimes I need to be reminded that. But I certainly don't want someone in the same breath to say I shouldn't be doing what I do. Yeah, that was a long-winded answer, but
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to transition into the audience questions, and the first one, and please feel free to put some more in the chat. The first one was also a question that I was hoping to get to, which is the necessity of a self-care for adults, and don't they need to be able to process their own climate emotions first? I would editorialize and say, yes, absolutely. That's essential. Harriet, maybe you want to start with this.
I think, mental health is about having feelings, right? That fit the situation and managing those feelings effectively, having coping skills. It's not just about feeling good or feeling happy. It's about how we manage those feelings and how we live with those feelings as we live the climate crisis. And so, yes, I would say as the parent or the educator, that's part of your role too in working intergenerationally and with your children in your life, young people in your life, to be able to help manage your own feelings, learn about that yourself, but also put it out there too. You don't have to have all the answers. You can feel afraid, concerned, and sharing those feelings and being honest. That's what we've heard from everyone on the panel, right? We should be able to be open and honest about our feelings. We won't have all the answers. We can't solve the climate crisis, none of us. Together, we can make it less worse than it will be, but we're all going to go through this and live this together. So I think validating those concerns, I think that's an excellent question, and one we need to face openly and honestly.
Carolyn, I'd love to hear from you on this. Teaching in public schools can feel like a very embattled profession already. How do you take care of yourself, and how do you and your colleagues support each other in this process?
Yeah, teaching is can be a challenging profession. It also is very rewarding, but there's a lot of demands. And I think in the midst of the climate crisis that we're living through, I think at least I've experienced increased demands on my time and sort of ways that I can support my students in my school district. And I guess I think that one of the things that is not that I have all the answers, but I think as adults we can model taking breaks, taking a step back, kind of not being on all the time, which I think, you know, as Harriet was saying, we are all in this together and we need to be prepared for the long haul. And so I think as an older person who's been involved a little bit longer, I can hopefully model some of that for students in terms of how to take care of myself emotionally, and also how to do that while being there for other people. And I certainly don't have that figured out, but it's something I aspire to and hope that I set at least an okay model for my students.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. This is a great question for the Gen Zers about if they can think back to the transition sort of into being a teenager. So from middle school to high school, how do you wish, how in your ideal world would you have been introduced to this topic, and how would you like to have been supported at that age?
I think for me, I also kind of revived an environmental club in my high school. And I think I had wanted to do it my freshman year, but ultimately responsibilities. So I ended up doing it my junior year. And what I realized was a lot of youth just didn't know how to talk to each other. And we're kind of programmed in a way to just like look forward to the main person talking. And so everyone would always just look to me, and I didn't have all the answers, obviously. Like I kind of wanted someone else to tell me the answers. And so what I realized, someone mentioned the concept of like teach-ins, right? So when it's just like an intentional space where you're meant to learn from each other. And so we would basically like crowdsource like topics of like, what are we interested in? It doesn't have to be climate change, global warming. It can be local native plants. It can be how to recycle properly, because sometimes you just don't know. And so it became like desertification one week, and then the next week we were talking about the importance of trees. And it was kind of like really just coming directly from like the 20 kids that were there. And we just reflected and kind of like bounced off ideas of like, okay, but like, why don't we see that in our community? Or, you know? And so I think that the best way to start this process for youth is just giving them the space to lead and influence what they're being taught and what they are wanting to learn and how to incorporate it, right? So I feel like those spaces, oftentimes I feel like as older Gen Z, we think we just need to keep talking to youth, but and teachers too. But sometimes it also just helps teachers to take a step back and like hear what people are saying, or like the youth are saying. And it gives them that moment to really reflect on how they're feeling and maybe think of what their needs are and how to communicate it. So I think that's like, if I would have had that in middle school, that would have set me up much better. But yeah, that's something I advocate for.
What about you, Heidi? Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna support all of that for sure. And that's such a coincidence. I wonder if it's to do with the age, but I also started my Green Club in my junior year. But I mean, that was partly due to the pandemic, partly due to responsibilities. But I think I just wish that there had been someone to teach me these things beforehand. Now in Jersey, fortunately, there's new introductions of climate into curriculums, but this, aside from the 3 Rs, reduce, recycle, reuse, or even the carbon footprint, which was invented by BP. But those conversations were really where it stopped for me. I remember in middle school, and this is still the case for a lot of places. So I just wish I had learned a little bit earlier about the truth of things. And that is a delicate balance, because I don't know how I would have received, the truth as a 5-year-old or whatnot, or we're talking middle school, so like 10, no, 12, 13. Yeah, I think also because there are 12, 13-year-olds existing that are, they would like to have access to these resources from what I've heard directly from them. So just access to resources, I think, and we're not experienced in terms of leadership. We have to get there at some point. So just advice, also mentors, that's really helpful. I think that's what I have for now. Yeah, just wish I had learned more about the truth earlier.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we have also a question, and this also is something that we were trying to get to during the main panel, which is about the connection between these kinds of conversations and other kinds of action. And I really do want to say that, this is a type of action. Having an emotions conversation is a beginning of action, but how do we have a conversation that acknowledges tough feelings and also leaves room for action? Do you think it's important that adults, parents, teachers who engage in these conversations are also taking other forms of action at the same time? And Harriet, I wonder if you have thoughts.
Thanks, Anya. Our motto at Climate Mama over many years has been tell the truth, actions speak louder than words, and don't be afraid. And so I think, to Heidi's point, we need to tell the truth, and it comes in a different way for a 5-year-old than it does to an 11-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old. But we need to tell the truth. We need to model behavior, as Carolyn was talking about. We need to show through our actions, and that can be many things. It's not necessarily leading the march, although for some people that will be. It's knowing when to stand back, stand up and stand back as a mentor and as an adult with young people. And so, yes, I think, I'll let others say, but I think we need to be able to show through many different types of actions, at home, at work, in conversation, that we are taking those actions, but then also let our young people show us and lead us as well, and know when to allow, be able to step back.
Great. Others want to add on about why do you think it's important? Do you think it's important for adults to model action as well? And also, how do you move from emotions to action?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of like with anything in life, right? Like, you're always, throughout your childhood and even as adults, being socialized based off of what you're experiencing on a daily basis. And so again, if we never saw someone recycle in our household, we're never gonna know unless someone is like, you don't recycle, like, and things like that, and bigger things, like, oh, what do you do to relax? Or like, I feel like a lot of activists have had this conversation in the past couple of years, where it's like, oh, so how do you practice self-care? And it's like, I don't know, I don't do it, because for me personally, I've just grown up around like elders who have been working the whole time I've known them, right? Like since way before I was born, because it's like survival mode. And if we don't talk about emotions, if we don't talk about doing like sustainable practices throughout our lives, we just don't learn about it. And so modeling it is, I think, the best way, honestly, because as much as you can tell someone to do something, if you're not doing it yourself, there's a questionability, or I don't know how to say that, like, kind of like, okay, well, if you want me to do something, why aren't you doing it yourself? And so there can be that little like rebellious aspect of it. Yeah.
Great. We had a member of the audience with their hand up. I don't know if you want to put your question in the chat. I'm just not sure we're set up to take live questions. So here's a question about how do we become more embodied beings? How do we both deepen into ourselves and live into the fullness of our own being and lives while also connecting outwardly in a way that is generative? Does anyone have a framework for answering that question?
I think this one is really hard because it's kind of like how there's no one size fits all type of solution. And especially when it comes to embodying like ourselves and just being who we are in a capitalist society where like everything demands our attention, energy, and like labor and stuff, like I think it can be very difficult. But I think how I'll answer this, I guess, is leaning into our interests. I think that as we navigate life, like you don't necessarily have to make your passion your job, but you have to make room for your passions, right? And so I've been talking about this a lot recently in climate, like mental health conversations, like double dipping. I know like when I was in college, it was like double dip as much as possible to like with your credits and stuff. And I feel like we have to do that in life as our time becomes more like preoccupied and like we don't really get to decide where our time goes. And so when trying to start new projects for like sustainability and just addressing climate mental health, I think that we have to incorporate our hobbies because inherently we're going to have like better mental health if we are doing things that we love and that nourish us. And so if you know that you love being in nature and you love hiking, but you want to give back to your community and create safe spaces where you can learn about the environmental crisis, do like a guided hike, right? Like show people your environment, show people that you are part of this and it's not something that you're separated from, and how to navigate that. So kind of just like finding more and more intersections where you can thrive helps you become that embodied being.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we're almost to the end of our time together. We're going to do a lightning round of questions. Ask each panelist, what is it that's bringing you joy right now these days? And how do you practice self-care? My answer is karaoke. Heidi, do you have a thought?
I think it's speaking with people, yeah, and climate cafes actually.
Excellent.
For me, it's like learning with my friends and community about native plants and what we can do out here.
Amazing.
For me, it is taking my puppy into the park and just watching her run, and it grounds me, just clears my head.
I think for me, it's sort of a dual process, both inward. I really need my time in the woods where I'm not talking to anybody. And I also love engaging outwardly, working with my students and seeing them become leaders. That really energizes me. It gives me joy.
Awesome. Is that everybody? Okay, so my technology challenge has been taken away. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to show the resources that I wasn't able to show with my shared screen at the beginning of the okay. No, it's not. It's really not. It's not going to let me do that.
I can share. What resource were you trying to put on?
Well, I just wanted to go to our main page, Climate Mental Health Net /parents, and show, if you could scroll down and show the different resources that we have there really quickly.
Yep.
Thanks.
Coming up.
And while he's doing that, I do want to mention that we have still a focus group opportunity. So if you go to, Climate Mental Health Net /parents, And our focus group, it's a federally funded research translation grant. And we are talking to parents who are willing to discuss with us the use of these resources, how we could make them better, and what they want to know and how they could be helped to talk to their own children or to children they care for or teach about climate emotions. And this is a paid research opportunity. So it's $75 for a 1-hour focus group. And we'll share the link in the chat for how you can sign up. And our ultimate goal with this is to, and do you want to show the climate emotions wheel as well, Leanne? Our ultimate goal with this is to expand these resources out, to have them available multimedia, animations, short videos, and audio versions as well, so that parents have all the support that they need. There have been translations into Spanish. Climate Cardinals is our partner in translating many of these resources into multiple languages. So yes, thank you very much, Leanne. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And definitely there's going to be the recording available, and we're going to be able to share many of the links out that were in the chat. And just want to say thanks again for joining us. Sarah, I want to hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Anya, for moderating, and just thank you everyone for being here tonight, and for all of the people who aren't here live but will be listening later. Again, thank you so much. I know there was a million links put into the chat, and we will follow up with all of those later in case you weren't able to collect all of them. But I will also just put in once more also, if you're interested in participating in the focus groups, please just fill out a brief form. And Julie, who's working with Anya on the focus groups, will follow up with you. And a huge thank you to Vanessa and Carolyn and Harriet and Heidi for all of your comments and wisdom. And I just have so much gratitude for being able to work with all of you and everything that I'm able to learn and grow, and to really do this work together. We can't do any of this alone, and this requires all of us. This is, you know, as everyone said, this is an all hands on deck moment, and no one's going to save us. And the only way we're going to get through this is together. And I just find that by doing this work, I have developed friendships and grown and learned from people like everyone you heard from tonight. So a huge thank you to everyone who participated tonight, and thank you all for being here again. And please visit our website, the Climate Mental Health Network website, which is climatementalhealth.net. We have tons of free resources. We are working as fast as we can. We're a very tiny, nimble team with virtually no budget, trying to make as many resources as possible in multiple languages. So thank you again.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
For joining us. It looks like there's a problem with the link that we shared. Can we reshare that link? It looks like there's a problem with the form for the sign up.
Oh yeah, let me do that right now.
And this will be shared in a follow-up as well.
Yes, here's the link. That should be the correct one. Apologies. And if anyone has any questions about the focus groups, Anya, you know, we can stay on and answer those questions as well.
Yes, absolutely.